Common sense tells us that if you build a giant wall around your local factories, well, they're going to thrive, right? They're protected. But what if common sense is just completely wrong? What if protecting them is exactly what destroys them? Welcome to this explainer. Today we are completely dismantling a massive economic myth, and we're doing it using cold, hard numbers. Get ready for a data-driven face slap.
So I want you to imagine this scenario. A country suddenly drops its tariffs. Foreign competition floods the market, local factory owners absolutely panic, and the media is screaming about an impending disaster. But then, an economic miracle happens. The local factories don't die. They innovate, they speed up, they get better. Now, this isn't just some wild theory. This is a brutal, documented economic reality check.
The data reveals a really brutal truth here. Protection equals slow death, and competition equals survival. A massive 15-year dataset literally tracked the exact moment an entire nation's manufacturing sector was thrown straight to the wolves. And it turns out, being thrown to the wolves is sometimes the absolutely only way to learn how to fight.
This all comes from a landmark study published in the Journal of International Economics. The researcher, Anna M. Fernandes, didn't care about political rhetoric or feelings. She used an incredibly deep dataset to prove that coddling industries basically just breeds laziness. It's the perfect example of how raw data can totally overturn our deepest, most comfortable assumptions.
And we aren't looking at some boring, abstract, theoretical model here. We're looking directly at Colombia from 1977 to 1991. This era was a chaotic, real-world laboratory. First, they had open borders. Then, a massive crisis hit, and they slammed the doors shut with high tariffs. Finally, in 1985, they just ripped those doors back open again. That's 15 years of extreme economic swings. You have a boom, a bust, and then sudden, intense openness. It created the absolute perfect conditions, basically a natural experiment that gives us an unfiltered behind-the-scenes look into exactly how factory managers react when government shields are raised and then suddenly dropped. But right away, the researcher faced a massive problem. Companies lie. Simple output numbers are actually deeply flawed. Why? Well, because managers are smart. When they know an economic shock is coming, they change their inputs to game the system. If you just look at what a factory produces on paper, you're looking at manipulated numbers. You are not looking at raw efficiency. So to tear off the data's disguise, she built the ultimate lie detector test. Instead of just looking at the final product sitting on the loading dock, she tracked raw material usage. Things like electricity. Think about it. Factories absolutely have to use electricity every single day. By tracking those unavoidable inputs, she stripped away all the management tricks to isolate pure, unadulterated efficiency. This is such a brilliant distinction. You see, fake productivity is just adding more labor or buying another machine to make more stuff. But true efficiency, that is what happens when you do more with the exact same resources. By separating the predictable choices from the real surprises and using raw materials as the ultimate truth teller, we finally get a completely pure look at how good a factory actually is. And here is the absolute face slap in the data. For every 10% drop in tariffs, which is a brutal increase in foreign competition, true factory efficiency skyrocketed by 1.2%. That is a massive, massive gain. The pure fear of going bankrupt actually drove them to get significantly better. The numbers paint a crystal clear picture. During the first period of liberalization, efficiency went up. But when the government swooped in and protected them from 1982 to 1984, efficiency totally flatlined. It actually went negative. Then, the second those borders opened again, efficiency exploded upwards. Foreign competition literally acts as a pure adrenaline shot to local manufacturing.
The brutal truth is that the data doesn't care about our feelings, and it definitely doesn't care about political slogans. Shielding companies from international rivals encourages slack. It's human nature. When you know the government has your back, you stop trying. You just coast.
Now, who do you think felt the pain the most? It was the biggest, fattest, most monopolistic companies. They took the absolute hardest hit. They'd been living off the fat of the land for years, so when that wall fell, they were forced into rapid, brutal adaptations just to survive. Meanwhile, the small, agile plants, they pivoted so much easier. So how did these massive corporate dinosaurs actually survive the meteor strike? Well, they radically changed their behavior. Over 80% of the surviving plants totally ditched their subpar, expensive local materials and started buying superior foreign parts. They stopped relying on local mediocrity and finally tapped into global innovation.
This created a really brutal but highly effective blueprint for survival. The weakest factories simply died out. But honestly, their death wasn't a total loss for the economy. All of their market share was immediately reallocated to the highly productive survivors. It trimmed the fat and made the entire industry drastically stronger.
And look, for the skeptics out there, the researcher completely anticipated every excuse. She carefully controlled for the age of the plants, wild swings in exchange rates, and broader economic cycles. She literally left zero room for alternative excuses. The conclusion remained rock solid.
Okay, let's pause here for a second. Is this study actually completely bulletproof? Because to maintain absolute truth, we have to turn a critical lens on the paper itself. If you dig deep enough into this, there is actually one potential, fatal logic flaw hidden right in the math. Here's the catch. The study measures productivity using revenue, basically how much money the factory made instead of the actual physical boxes they shipped. This means we might just be looking at clever price manipulation. Think about it. If a factory survives and just charges a higher price markup, its revenue goes up, even if the assembly line didn't get a single second faster.
So we really have to ask if survival just means raising prices while simultaneously buying cheaper foreign parts. Well, the efficiency might look a whole lot better on paper than it actually is on the factory floor. The companies are definitely surviving, yes, but the victory might be slightly more financial than mechanical.
But look, even with that caveat, the overwhelming direction of the data remains totally undeniable. Competition forces adaptation, protection forces stagnation. And in today's era of global trade wars, this leaves us with a really provocative final thought. When you build a wall to protect your industries, are you keeping the enemy out, or are you just building a tomb for your own factories? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the obvious.